Now, for much of this morning, our top story has been Brexit. Will the EU's ultimatum to the UK Parliament work? Will Theresa May's unpopular plan finally pass at the 11th hour? Or is no deal more likely than ever? Well, amid all of that confusion and bickering in Brussels and in Westminster, it is perhaps worth taking a step back and asking, how did Britain get here? And for that, I am joined this morning by the historian and economist Kevin O'Rourke, who's the author of A Short History of Brexit. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks very much for coming in. In your book, then, you argue that Brexit didn't emerge out of the blue, that Britain has seen itself distinct from the rest of the continent for a long time. Tell us, what's the root of that distinction, in your view? Is this Britain's unreconciled views about Britain's place in the wider world?
Well, I mean, the story, in a way, starts in the 1950s. That's when Europe starts to move towards greater unity. And at that stage, Britain is a very different sort of country. It wasn't nostalgic about an empire. It still had an empire to a large extent. It had close trade links with the Commonwealth that reflected its 19th century history. It also had a very different agricultural system to the ones that you had in countries like France and Germany. And so it wasn't surprising in a way that they hesitated to join at that stage. It would have been okay for them if the Europeans had decided to go for a simple free trade area. But once the Europeans decided to go for a customs union, which involves a common external tariff policy, then Britain had to choose between Europe and the Commonwealth. And that was a choice that they never wanted to have to make.
So you don't take too seriously then those kinds of arguments that this is a sort of imperial fantasy on behalf of some Brits who are longing for a past that no longer really exists?
There may well be imperial fantasies that are important in some quarters in Britain, but you don't have to appeal to those to understand why Britain was initially reluctant. I mean, there was a reality on the ground, not just a fantasy.
Indeed, and some of that reality, certainly economic problems in ex-industrial towns in the United Kingdom. Do you think that sense that globalisation wasn't working well for lots of people in the UK was a big motivator for that vote?
I think it's very clear that the problems associated with deindustrialisation, maybe in part caused by globalisation, were important in driving the Brexit vote in various parts of, in particular, Northern England. Of course, it isn't just Britain that has these problems. I mean, there are a lot of people who voted for Trump in similar regions in the United States, and France isn't immune from these stresses and strains either. There's a lot of very convincing work that suggests that it's the combination of globalisation on the one hand and austerity on the other that withdrew safety nets at precisely the time when people needed them, that was driving the Brexit vote in the north. However, it's more complicated than that, because there are also lots of very affluent voters in the south of England, for example, who voted for Brexit for completely different reasons. So when you have as tight a vote as the one that we had, necessarily there are all sorts of different factors that go into producing the result.
Yeah, and you mentioned the vote for Donald Trump in the United States. Do you see serious parallels then, kind of across the West, with people almost sticking two fingers up at the establishment and saying this kind of politics isn't working for us?
Yes is the answer. And if the big disasters of 2016 happened in the United States and in Britain, I mean, I would say that that's because those are the two countries where the pendulum swung the most away from the state and towards the free market, and maybe it swung a bit too far, and now there's a reaction. I mean, you have obviously populists in many European countries, but if you look at incomes of the poorest people in a country like France, I mean, they haven't stagnated, even though people aren't doing very well, but they haven't stagnated the way that they have been doing in the United States for, I mean, decades. So I think that there is now a rebalancing that is required everywhere. And I suppose the issue for the European Union going forward is, can it make itself be perceived as being part of the solution to the problem, or do people think of it as being part of the problem itself?
Indeed, and I wonder then whether or not this is not just that Britain sees itself as distinct from continental Europe, but also that Europe has seen Britain as quite a different entity as well.
Well, I mean, Europe and Britain are quite different. But Britain is a much more liberal country, to use the French term, and Britain probably has put the brakes on European attempts to have a more social Europe. I mean, you could argue that, and I think that Macron is probably right when he says that if Europe's going to survive, it's going to be because it's viewed as being a Europe that protects us, that allows us to combine the benefits of the market with protection against the risks of the market. Maybe not having Britain in the EU anymore will make it easier to advance that agenda. Yeah,
but something clearly in the British mindset, if you can talk about it in such a sweeping way, has changed. We know, obviously, they voted yes to be in the common market in 1975. In 2016, they voted out. How do you account for that swing in public opinion?
Well, I'm going to say two things there. Firstly, I mean, the story's largely got to do with Mrs. Thatcher, and it's got to do with the divisions in the Tory party that followed from her sort of switching to becoming a very radical Eurosceptic in the late 1980s. And I mean, we know that it's the Conservative Party problems of keeping it united that led to Cameron calling the referendum in the first place. But I mean, the other thing that I would say, just to pick up on what you said there about generalizations, is that, I mean, one thing that people have to understand is that some of the most fervent pro-Europeans in Europe today are those millions of British people who want to remain European. I'm not sure that there are many people in France who feel as passionately European as all of those people who are going to be marching in London on Saturday. Yeah,
I'm quite conscious that we've seen EU flags in the UK out on those marches that perhaps we'd actually never really seen out on the streets before.
No, it's become a question of identity, I think, on the pro-European side there. I mean, it was always, I suppose, to a certain extent, a question of identity on the Eurosceptic side. It's now a question of identity on both sides, and that's interesting. It's also maybe slightly alarming if you just think about this from a British point of view, because when you have politics that becomes defined by questions of identity, it becomes very difficult to reach compromises. I might agree with you that you're right on a particular policy matter, but I'm not going to agree with you that I'm wrong to be a member of my tribe. And so that they really do have a problem in that country. They have to learn how to live with each other.
Just finally, before we let you go then, there was a great quote from the Prime Minister of Luxembourg yesterday who said, waiting for Brexit is a bit like waiting for Godot, the implication being that maybe it's never going to happen. Can I ask you to make a prediction? Do you think they'll get there?
I would guess that they're going to leave, but no, I don't. But the truth is, I don't know what's going to happen, and nobody does. And isn't that extraordinary?
Yeah, it is absolutely extraordinary. In theory, less than a week to go until the early Brexit deadline. Thank you very much indeed, Kevin O'Rourke, there talking to me on the programme.